Awesome. For those people who, for some reason, are unable to attend, had lots of people sign up, which was great, but every now and then things do get in our way. And I want to make sure everybody has the opportunity to review the recording. There, just made it full screen for myself, which is also handy. The chat is disabled. What? That's not fair. All right, thank you. I think I fixed that. Good to know. Perfect. And I see Carol has a raised hand. If there's something that you would like to put into chat or Q&A, either one. It's still disabled. So sorry. What's up? This is part of doing a live webinar, I guess. And therefore, I think I'm just going to rely on the Q&A, and I'll be able to monitor it there. Okay, I hope that makes sense to everyone. All right, it is now 6:31, so I do want to get started because this is an action-packed night of tips and strategies for creatives of all types. All right, so first of all, I want to set my timer so that I don't go over time, because there's nothing more frustrating. I want to make sure that I cover every single bit of this and give you your money's worth for showing up. And just to make sure that I do stay on track with everything. So tonight's workshop is called Do Your Art. It's a creativity workshop, and I do this kind of old school. I have made these posters that I'll hold up and share and display on the easel behind me throughout the webinar. I don't like using PowerPoint and slides because I think it's much more engaging if you see a person and you know that I'm here and I'm live and I'm here to hear your questions, give you advice, give you tips and strategies. This is definitely not pre-recorded. I can tell you it was such a gorgeous day today. It was a little cool, but I like it that way. Unfortunately, I didn't get to go out for a hike today because I was preparing for tonight's workshop, but typically I try to go for about an hour walk every day in the conservation land nearby. So I was looking outside, noticing how beautiful blue skies, and I'm sure, I hope that you also had some time to get out in nature. Tonight's webinar is supported with grants from the cultural councils. 12 different cultural councils here in Massachusetts supported this webinar. And I have this lovely map that shows all of the range of places that the support came from: Acushnet, Buckland, Chicopee, Dennis, East Bridgewater, Gardner, Harvard, Haverhill, Lawrence, Manchester by the Sea, Norton, and Revere. And I'm grateful to all of those cities and towns for supporting this webinar, this creativity workshop. So just to give you a little bit of a preview of what we're going to be covering tonight. First, I'm going to begin with a little bit about me so that you understand my background and where I come from and my credentials in presenting this workshop. I'm going to talk about journaling because even though I'm not a big journaler myself, I do think it's important to write down some things about our art and our creativity. And I have a very unique way that you can use to gauge your own creativity. And you will quickly see that on days that you devote at least a little bit of time to your art, you're going to feel better. And I have documentation and I have proof and I have a very simple way for you to also keep track. I'm going to talk about how you can carve out art day. And what that means is an entire 8-hour workday every week that you can add and do your art. We're going to have an activity. I'll ask you to do something and then come back and share it with the group. And then I'm going to talk about creating an artist statement. That is something that a lot of people want to do, but they don't know how. And I have a very simple way for you to do that you can use with any product, any art, any offering that you have that you think it would be helpful to have an artist statement go along with it. We're going to talk about the importance of a calendar. As a creative and somebody who tends to go by the seat of my pants, if you have read the book, Save the Cat Writes a Novel, you know that there is a pantser and a plotter. I've tried both, but I think it's more fun when you just let creativity happen. But having a calendar is a very useful way for you to stay on track. And my whole strategy is about working toward a performance at the end. And it doesn't matter what your art form is. If you set a date, you are much more motivated to get things done. And that's the benefit. You will elevate your move. You'll have a finished product. And you can repeat this process 3 times every year, maybe even more. And we're also going to do the folded paper technique, which is a very powerful exercise that will show you that you really need to take time for your own art. I want to start with this little story about a person who I met with 23, 24 years ago, who wanted to be my coach. She was not a certified coach. She really didn't have the credentials, but we were friends. And I thought, this will be fun. This will be great. We met every Sunday morning for 2 hours over coffee and talked about our week and talked about the week upcoming. We talked about having plans, trying to get on top of our own goals. One week, I had an epiphany. I swear, I discovered my purpose that week. I was so excited to share with my coach what had happened that week. She knew that I wanted to be an author. I talked about publishing a novel, writing another novel. But this week, what I discovered is that my purpose and my goal was to inspire others to do their art. I couldn't decide between all the different things that I was working on at the time. Being a fiber artist, having my own business, doing sewing, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more. Being a visual artist, being a writer, an author, dabbling a little bit in music, but inspiring others to do their art. It was the thing that made me feel all wiggly inside. It was like a moment when I knew my calling. When I told this person my idea, she said, "You're beyond help." And I was crushed. I was devastated, truthfully. I didn't know what to do. I thought I knew my purpose. And this one person took it away from me for a while. It took me a long time to get over that. And I share this story because you may have had people in your past who unwittingly and unknowingly have said things to you, written things to you. Offhand, they didn't even realize what they were saying, but as artists and creatives and makers, we know how important it is, how important words are. I share that story so that you understand we can make a difference, we can make a change every single day. And today is our day to do our art. All right, so a little bit more about me, and I won't spend too much time, but I have had work published in these publications and magazines. Through my business, I had a sewing business for over 20 years. This is another one that appeared in a book. And this one also appeared in a magazine and a show house. And then I also have other things beyond window treatments. This is something that I made when I defended my dissertation. You can see it's made up of pictures and writings and things from my past. And then this side, which is colorful, talks about what I learned in doing my dissertation. And I realized that my true calling is in writing, but also in coaching. And here is one of my clients. She wrote, this is Eileen from Cork, Ireland, who is both a fiddler and a visual artist. Bernadette was always encouraging and supportive. She helped me to gather the necessary tools to rejuvenate my creative spirit. I continue to be a major part of the thriving artistic scene in Cork City, where I live, teach, play music, and have a studio in Backwater Studios. And I teach life drawing painting at Crawford College of Art. And I met Eileen many, many years ago through Eric Meisel, who is also a prolific author in the field of creativity. Another one of my clients is Dr. Wheel. I have had the pleasure of working with Bernadette Stockwell as my writing coach and mentor for the past year, and what a year it has been. Through a pandemic, Bernadette has been the shining light that kept me focused when everything else seemed to be pulling away my attention from writing. And Alex wrote a book, and she's working on other projects, as well as so many other things that she has done creatively. And then finally, this is from a musician. Bernadette is the ultimate accomplished person I would recommend to have on anyone's team. She is kind, sensitive, thoughtful, talented, energetic, with a passionate and untiring work ethic. And I know Nan through the Claflin Hill Symphony Orchestra, which is based in Milford, Massachusetts. I do a lot of PR for them, graphic design, the website, things like that. So that's a little bit about me and where I come from. But now I'd like to learn a little bit about you and where you come from. And I'd love for you to put into the Q&A, because the chat isn't working, what is your art form? Do you have a goal? And what is getting in your way? And you may not know the answer to that third question. And you don't even have to actually type these up. This is a personal question, all of them. But I would be interested to find out, what is the range of art forms that are represented in this group here tonight. Historical fiction. I love that. I love that. That's so interesting. Thank you, Michelle. Anyone else want to share their art form? Sewing? Awesome. Me too. A writer and a coach, perfect. Writing no goal, totally understand that. Sometimes, often, the best part is just doing it, because you will feel better when you spend time on your art. I know this. So it doesn't really matter what your art form is. What I'm going to be talking about tonight pertains to all different art forms. And for me, I like to use the mnemonic, live life epically, to talk about all the different art forms. For me and for my purposes, I think there are 7 different art forms. There's a little bit of crossover in some of them. Many creatives are participating in more than one art form, like my client Eileen in Ireland is a masterful fiddler, but also a brilliant visual artist. So live life epically. The literary arts, that can be writing novels and all the different kinds of novels, like historical fiction. Also poetry, playwriting, essays, nonfiction, all different kinds of writing. And then visual artists. Those are people who create things that we look at and see. Paintings. That can also be in books. They can be oil, acrylic, watercolor. They can be collage, a huge range of visual artists. Fiber artists, like Gwen, as a seamstress or sewing, and different projects that you do. I think the more modern word, which I love these days, is sewist, although my Microsoft Word does not accept that it is a word yet. But I think it is more encompassing of all the different things that fiber artists do, which might include quilts, wall art, wall hangings, can also include weaving, macrame, crochet, knitting, sewing, all different kinds of things that have to do with fiber. Garments, wearable art is also another type of fiber art. Environmental art has to do with our environment and the different things that we see around us. Can be interior design. When I was making window treatments and sewing for interior designers, it was all about how the scene looked. And one of my favorite designers, Patty Coltsis, talked about how she was creating a life form that supported the families that lived in that place. And I always thought that was such a beautiful way to look at the trade of interior design. I also think of it in terms of gardening, architecture, landscape design, anything that we can walk into and surrounds us. I suppose it would also include installation art, which is kind of a cool area as well. Performing arts include those things that are typically on stage, could be acting, musicians, doing slam poetry, anything where an individual is standing before an audience, and an audience can be just one person. It can also be something in these days that we can very easily record, post to YouTube. Lots of famous people on YouTube got their starts that way. TikTok, Facebook, all kinds of different things that provide a vehicle for us as artists, creators, and makers to reach out to an audience. And art is always about the connection between the maker and the audience, but also what it is to the maker themselves. Industrial arts are those things that I would describe as hard art in some way. And by that, I mean like carpentry, glass blowing, metalwork, jewelry making, things like that. that is probably one of the areas that I have the least experience with, but I have great respect for people who blow glass and also for people who work with wood. I think it's pretty cool. And finally, culinary art, which I have the deepest respect for, because anybody who owns a business is working their rear end off to make that business a success. And that can include things like cafes or 5 Michelin star restaurants or food trucks, but also people who have pop-up dinners, catering, and making food for yourself and your family. Culinary art is that blend of chemistry and art, and when they connect and when you make something with those things, those elements, I believe that is just amazing, stellar. So what I talk about applies to all of these different art forms. And you can figure out which one is of the most focus for you here tonight, give it a priority, but you certainly can include a variety of different things. For example, I consider myself both a literary artist, but also a fiber artist. And tonight I am performing. So very often we do a mix of many, many different things. And when I talk about these art forms, I created this pyramid, which also helps me to understand and conceptualize how the pyramid and how the different elements all work together. Somebody who read a draft of my manuscript for my upcoming book called Do Your Art, they mentioned the similarity of the pyramid to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I thought, well, I didn't have that in mind, but I am familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I was actually quite pleased that they could see this connection. And when in my book, I devote a chapter to each one of these elements, I think often creatives try to tackle too many different things at the same time. And that is when we can tend to stagnate and get overwhelmed. But if you can focus on one element at a time and do several exercises, reflect on it, think about it, and then move on, that's when you will gain strength and an inner support that will keep you going. I think of this bottom layer as motivation. The thing that you need most, especially in the early phases of being a creative, that's the time when you don't have an audience. You may not have anybody that is reading your work. It's really hard to find people to read a short story because we're all so busy. You don't have the publication behind you, but you need something to keep going. So I begin with pondering. And in the book, I have many different ways for you to think about pondering, but just taking the time to reflect and to think about what you did and what you plan to do. Even if it's 3-5 minutes before and especially after one of your art sessions, that you will quickly see how it is like exercise. Many people have studied the connection between doing physical exercise and how it will give you a mental boost. And I believe that the same is true when you do your art, when you take some time to do your art. After that is play, because who doesn't like to play? Doing art should be fun. If it isn't, you might want to think about what it is that you're doing. What is it that is making it unfun? I started my sewing business because I like to sew. I was good at it. People started asking me to do projects. When I first started making draperies, I learned how to make draperies by taking apart somebody else's mistakes. And I quickly learned how to put things back together successfully. It wasn't really fun, and I wouldn't call it playful, but when I take the time to make garments for myself, like this one that I designed, had the fabric made the top, that's when it becomes fun. When you make something and give it away, that becomes fun too. So figure out how you can be playful with your art. That's going to be one of your biggest motivating factors. After that is planning. Yeah, unfortunately, as somebody who has severe ADHD, never knew what it was when I was in school, but I do know now, and I see the similarities and the tendencies. It's hard to plan. One reason is because I have so many things that I want to do. I'm so excited about all different projects. At one time, I had just read Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way. She mentioned, dictates, talks about, sorry, some strong verbs there, always doing morning pages. Many artists talk about how they religiously do their 3 pages of longhand writing every single day. I tried that for a while, and I got so frustrated with my horrible penmanship. It felt like 3 pages of not being productive. Instead, I turned my attention to some writing projects that I had put off. I couldn't decide which one. Therefore, I decided to devote 1 day a week to one of 3 different writing projects. I was writing a novel. So on Mondays and Thursdays, I spent an hour writing a novel. I wanted to write children's books because my kids were young and I was reading a lot of children's books, and like a lot of uninformed people, I thought, that's easy. So I did that. And also because I had my sewing business, I started to write a book of instructions because there wasn't anything out there like what I knew how to do. And I thought that would be also productive. So Monday and Thursday, Tuesday and Friday, Wednesday and Saturday, and then Sunday, a day off. I made progress, but I quickly learned I was dabbling in 3 different projects and not getting anything finished. And instead, I decided I was going to work on my novel. And at the time, I had a woman who was working for me who liked to read. And the things that she liked to read was very similar to what I was writing. Every day, I would print off my 3 pages and hand them to Eleanor, and she would read them. She didn't give me feedback, but she was the thing that was out there receiving my work that kept me motivated. And planning is part of doing that. And I have a really interesting way that I'll share with you tonight, how you can plan. Presenting is also an important part of staying motivated. When I was presenting those 3 pages to Eleanor every day, it was the act of sharing. In my book, I talk about giving a present of your art, because it's a mini way for you to focus all of your attention on something specific that you will then share with an audience of 1. Not that you're looking for feedback, but just so that you can put all of your intention to getting one thing finished, giving it away, and knowing that somebody has received it. Up above, we have pause, because you've been through a lot on this first level, and it's important to take a moment to think and to rest. Then we have partner. A partner is one person, like my friend, my coworker, Eleanor, who received my work, that kept me interested, because I was no longer writing in a vacuum. I now had a partner. Even today, I have a partner. We text each other every night. About 10 o'clock, Jack will text me. He often says things like, I need a dare for tomorrow. Dare me to write 2,500 words. And I'll just write back, I dare you. And then the next day he checks in. And I often tell him what I have accomplished that day. A partner does not have to be somebody working in your same art form. And in some ways, it's helpful if they aren't, because this isn't a competition. It's just somebody, a human, that knows that you are doing art. They're there for you. They are your cheerleader. They are your friend, coach. If you don't connect with them, check in with them after 3 or 4 days, they are the person that's going to say, hey, what's up? What have you been working on? And that little gentle nudge will get you going again. And then the next one after that is polishing. I teach college writing at 2 different universities. A lot of times my students confuse revising and editing with polishing. Revising is not looking for the misspelled words and the grammar. That's editing. Revising is when you take something and you pull it apart and you figure out what's not working. And sometimes it's a matter of transforming it completely. When I was working on my dissertation, when I defended before my committee, the deadline was 2 weeks away, and I realized there was a huge change I had to make. That was revising. And I did it because I had a deadline and successfully got through the whole process. But polishing is the kind of thing that gives your art form the finish. Polishing in writing is very different than polishing in art. Sometimes the polish might be finding the perfect frame to go with your painting or varnishing it. Sometimes it can literally be polishing. If you're working in industrial arts and you have created something with metal or wood or glass, that actual last step of polishing is the thing that is going to make your art beautiful and come alive. And then after that, we're going to talk about promoting. Promoting what, you might ask? Well, at the top of the pyramid, at the gold level, is performing. So all along the way, performing your art is the goal, is the end goal. Performing for perhaps an anonymous audience. Tonight at this workshop, there are lots of people that I have never met before. I do not know. And that's a beautiful thing. Planning for this workshop is my performance. It's the thing that keeps me motivated, gets me going, gets me through all of the modification and every other level. So first you have to promote, tell people what you're doing, be a little braggy. It feels uncomfortable, but just think about writing it about another person, another entity, talking about it, making flyers, making postcards, anything that will help to promote to get an audience. And then right before your performance, you have to practice. I work with a lot of musicians. The executive director of Claflin Hill, Paul Surapine, is a clarinetist himself. During the pandemic, he was practicing a lot. And in April, he gave one of the most amazing performances, I would say, of his life and that I have ever witnessed. And it was all about practice. Practicing takes many different forms, depending on your art form. Sewing, sometimes, I don't know about you, but making a buttonhole can be scary. And I do like to practice before I set about putting it into the finished garment. And then at the top, the performance. Carol Burnett talked about her history as an actor. I saw a special, I can't remember where it was, a couple years ago. She talked about how hard it was for her to break into the business at first. She and a few of her friends, I think there were 5 altogether, were living in New York, trying to make it go. They weren't getting parts because they didn't have experience. And they didn't have experience because they weren't getting parts. Just like many writers, you can't get an agent until you've been published, and you can't be published without an agent. It's that catch-22. And someone suggested to her, why don't you put on your own show? And she did, with her friends. And through that show that they put on all by themselves, I think she said 3 or 4 of them got parts. They had proved themselves. Planning your performance, whatever that might be, is the key to keeping you going and keeping you motivated. If you're a gardener, plan a garden tour. Invite friends over to see that new part of your garden that you have worked on. If you're in the culinary arts, plan a pop-up dinner, or suggest to a friend that you will do the catering for a party. Thinking about how you can share with an audience. If you're into fiber art, put on what do they call that? A runway show, where you can share and display some of your makes. Lots of different ways. Visual artists who are showing at different galleries, they often have an opening night where their friends and family, but also patrons of the gallery, will come to see what this new artist has done. Actors, musicians, always are on stage. One of my favorite movies is La La Land, where one of the characters puts on a show like Carol Burnett. So think about that. That's what performance is all about. So working through these levels, and it's explained in my book. My book's coming out at the end of the summer, but that is my goal, to share with you tonight some of those ideas that you can put into practice right now. So this is what I think of for planning. I don't know if I'm a micro or macro planner, but when I'm overwhelmed with too many things to do, this is the thing that gets me through the day. It is a typical day. It starts at 6 a.m. and it goes through midnight. You decide when your best time to sleep is. And if you're a night owl, maybe that's going to be in the middle of the day. But it's broken down into 20-minute segments. 20 minutes is a good amount of time to devote to your art projects. When I'm overwhelmed, I put in what I want to do artfully first, and I often write it in red so that I can't not see it. Then I also include those tasks and duties that have to do with family, work. Work's important. As a professor and as somebody who has a schedule that comes and goes sometimes. It's important for me to make sure I devote time to work, to yourself. But if you can figure out where you can work in your art, and if you can devote 3 20-minute segments every single day, that might mean getting up 20 minutes earlier. And when you hit the snooze button and you're kicking yourself because you didn't, then you might need to carve out 20 minutes during a morning break or before you go into work. Sometimes at lunchtime, you can add in another 20 minutes. Sometimes at the end of the day, before you make dinner, you might be able to do another 20 minutes. And if you can do that 3 times a day, at the end of the week, you have 7 full hours. And then on the weekend, hopefully, you can also add in another hour. So that's how you can end up with a full workday every week. And I am getting a little bit overheated, so I'm going to see if I can open a window. Just bear with me a second because I don't want to pass out. All right. And you can find a printout of this page on my website, Do Your Art. It's called the 20-Minute Solution. And I highly recommend whenever you're feeling overwhelmed and you just want to get started, try that. Carve out your 20 minutes. Okay. So we talked about pondering, we talked about performing and presenting, and that is sort of the crux of my idea for doing your art. So now we have our first activities. And I hand wrote this tonight because I came up with this idea. Typically I do something a little bit different, but I thought there might be a lot of different art forms represented tonight. So I think this is going to work well for you. And I'm going to give you like 5-7 minutes to write this. I'd like you to write a letter to your favorite artist. And I'd like you to name them. And it can be a writer, artist, actor, metal worker, carpenter, gardener, whatever your art form, you likely know who the experts are in that field. And I'd like you to write a fan letter. Say something like, I'm thinking, they don't have to be alive, by the way. Something like, Dear Mr. Fitzgerald, I've always loved The Great Gatsby, and I wanted to tell you how much. So name 3 things that you love about their art. Be specific. And then I want you to close saying something like, thank you for your art. You are my favorite. And again, name the visual artist. All right, so I'm going to turn off my camera for about 5 minutes, and then I'll check in with you. about one more minute and then we'll be back, and hopefully if you're able to share, that would be great, but it is not necessary. All right. I don't know if anybody has this written down, if you're able to put it into the Q&A. I talked about Fitzgerald, F. Scott Fitzgerald. Always has been one of my favorite writers. I have many. One of my favorite writers is a man by the name of Rick Bass, who lives in rural Montana. And one of the books that caught my attention many, many years ago was called Winter. I remember hearing him interviewed on Fresh Air with Terry Gross. He was calling from one of the only 2 telephones in the town. As he was talking with Terry, he looked up and he said, "There's 2 chickadees sitting on a wire and they're looking at me like, what are you doing?" In writing this letter where you are praising somebody else, I would now like you to substitute your own name in place of that artist that inspires you. And the reason is you can be that person for somebody else. Think about anybody who has made it. They all started the same place that we are now, that you perhaps are. Confidence is the one key, and it is the hardest thing to learn. I participated in a webinar a couple summers ago where the speaker said, confidence is a choice, and it is your choice to make. I'm not sure that I agree with that. I don't think it's that simple. For me, it's more like turning on the tap, running the hot water. And it's not going to come right away. But if you're patient and you let it keep flowing, eventually you will have hot water. Substituting your name for that famous artist, maker, creative, and know that you too are doing important work. You too can be somebody's favorite artist, favorite author, favorite musician, favorite chef. You have to keep doing your art. Somebody is waiting for it. All right. Okay, so that's our first exercise of the night. When you journal, and I suggest that you take a little bit of time in pondering, starting with pondering, and continue to ponder. Every time that you do art, take 5 minutes after the session to quickly reflect about what worked well, what could have been done differently. Phrasing it that way instead of, this didn't work, I suck, this was a disaster. No. Say, next time, try this instead. Next time, be more prepared by having these things on hand. It is a kinder, more gentle way for you to give yourself that kind of positive feedback to keep going. Too often, for me, it's often in the middle of the night when I wake up and I just bash myself with all the things I didn't do. And it's not very fruitful. So think about how you can give yourself that positive feedback. Then I'd also like you to fill out what I call the emotion diary. And if you download my workbook, which I believe you will find if you sign up for my newsletter, it includes this chart, this handy dandy little chart. And over here on the left side are 10 different emotions. They range from happiness, frustration, sadness, pride, anger, irritation, embarrassment, enthusiasm, anxiety, disgust, and wonder. And think about, for all of those things, how do you score yourself? From strongly disagree to strongly agree. And if you do that, you will quickly see some trends. I also have on my website a calculator. It's the emotion diary calculator that you can quickly plug in your emotions and it will give you a score. And the score will range from positive 20 to negative 20. And that is just a way that you can get an idea of how valuable doing your art can be for you. If you think about the days that you devote 20 minutes to your art, an hour, 2 hours, you're going to feel better. And this is the actual documentation that will support that. So here's an example of my range in my emotion diary. And it goes from a high point of positive 15 to a low point of, I think, negative 14. And it goes up and down depending on what it is that I'm working on. And when I was doing my dissertation, part of that was to find out from other creative writers what their range in emotions was. And this is something called the interquartile range, which if you have studied statistics, you understand the importance of it, but it's not so important to know how you compare to other people. It's more to know how you compare to yourself. So what is interesting is the range, the outer range, but for the most part, I'm in this area. And one of the people that I worked with, her range was much, much tighter and much more positive, which is also something interesting to know. So if you take the time to write your own reflection every day and fill out that emotion diary chart, it will give you the motivation to keep going, to keep doing your art, which is what this is all about. The world needs more art. The world needs more creative people. We need people who are willing to take risks, who do the important work of figuring out problems and entertaining us, giving us delight, giving us pleasure. For the next exercise, I would like you to think about writing an artist statement. And what it says here is an artist statement is a not too long series of sentences that describes what you make and why you make it. It's a stand-in for you, the artist, talking to someone about your work in a way that adds to their experience of viewing that work. So in doing this, Your artist statement will answer these questions. What it is that you made, why, and how. All right, so this is another one of those. I'm going to give you some time. I'm going to turn off the camera. I want you to think about a specific product and answer the questions. What it is, why you did it, and how you did it. All right, and I'm going to put that hopefully into the Q&A. If I could figure that out. All right, so I think I'm just going to, again, I don't know if the chat is working for you, but I will just leave this up here and leave the camera on. All right, so take 5-7 minutes. Try to type it up if you can so that we can share them, because that would be fun. All right. So I'm hoping that some people might be able to put into the Q&A their artist statement, because I think it's very interesting to see the range that we have here tonight, and also just to see what you came up with. Many people who have attended this workshop in the past or one similar mentioned that they always wanted to do it, but they didn't really know how, and they didn't know how simple it was. And I think that very often we complicate things. I do it myself. And one of the reasons is it's easy not to do things that are hard, if that makes sense. When I break things down and look at them piece by piece, I feel more able to tackle the little things. There's an old saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. We can't eat an elephant all at once. When you think about it, and why would you want to eat an elephant? But when you think about it, the idea of tackling something that is that enormous is off-putting. So don't make it enormous. Make it small. When I'm teaching my college freshmen how to write research papers, I often will scare them the first day of class and say things like, you're going to be writing a 10 to 12 page paper, to which they say, I can't do that. But I have them write it in parts. They don't even know how much they're writing until they take all those parts and put them together. And they have written a 10 to 12 page paper. And they often say it was fun, it was easy, and they learn a technique that way. All right, so I have some responses here. Gwen wrote, she's working on a pillow bag. Awesome. And as a fiber artist, I know how challenging that can be. Why? It's for my son-in-law because he always likes to have his own pillow. Great. And how? It's heavy fabric, lots of planning, some trial and error, and a fair amount of swearing. That's so funny. Yes, very often our art projects are wrought with things that went awry. I knew a sewist very long time ago who had a phrase, as ye sow, so shall ye rip, with a seam ripper. And then another person wrote, I'm trying to write a novel and a series of short stories in the same universe, in the high fantasy genre. I love high fantasy and read many books since I was little, and I have ideas that I feel would be fun to share and explore. Don't know exactly how to get to the point, but chipping away at it little by little makes me feel good about writing. Excellent. Yeah, because that's the only way that we can write anything is word by word, as Anne Lamott wrote in her famous book, Bird by Bird. You got to do it piece by piece. We want it to be done. We want it to be finished. We want it to be out there and published. It doesn't work that way. You got to put in the time and the effort. The hardest part is as you're starting out, nobody cares, but they do. So find that partner, find that person, that touch point who is going to keep you honest and keep you on track. And Michelle wrote, I wrote 2 historical novels exploring daily life in the 19th century in New England. Very cool. I wanted to show facts of that time period that aren't often written about and to help readers make a connection with people who lived in the past. I wanted readers to see that they share many common concerns with past generations. That's really awesome. Things like overcoming prejudice and bullying, valuing friendship, and finding a purpose in life. Background working in living history museums and historical archives helped me to make the books realistic and believable and to bring the past alive for modern readers. That's terrific. That is such an excellent way to get motivated. And thinking about, exactly how we can share our work, our art, how we can talk about it. Maybe it's easier for people working in literary arts, but I'm not sure. Often people who work in like industrial arts, the last thing that they want to do is to write about it. I think thinking in terms of the what, why, and how gives us a good direction and makes it all more clear. Okay, so sage, Sherpas, and strugglers. I once heard an author named Carrie Oberberner talking about people who teach us, our mentors, our guides, our teachers, our coaches, and they often come in different shapes and sizes. The sage is the person who is the expert. They have the credentials, they have the certification, they have taken and passed the courses, they have the certificate that proves they did the work. Even if they aren't somebody who has those credentials, a sage is somebody who we respect, who we know has more expertise on a topic than we do. Then we have the Sherpas, like those people who help climbers at Mount Everest. Sherpas are those people who, and I'm sorry, I'm going to have to sit down. Sherpas are the people who are accustomed to the surroundings. They are familiar with the environment. They know the shortcuts. They are also really good at helping you get to your own goals. And then finally, we have the strugglers. And strugglers are people who have learned through their own struggles in the art form. I used to call myself a struggler because I have struggled with my own lack of self-confidence, my own lack of direction and drive. But these days, I prefer the term a striver instead. I know some tips and strategies that will make things work. I know how to get there. I strive to share that knowledge with you all. I believe with my heart and soul that we are all better off if we spend a little bit of time doing our own creativity, doing our own art. Okay, so finally, the next thing that I want you to do is the folded paper exercise. Okay, so I hope that you have actually brought a piece of paper to tonight's workshop and webinar. And if you haven't, you can do this mentally, but it is not as powerful as if you can do it physically. So take a piece of paper, fold it in half, and then fold it in half again. Give it a good crease. It just makes one of the steps later on a little bit easier. So now you have a piece of paper that's divided into quarters. And I'd like you to now think about 4 things that you would like to accomplish. 4 goals, maybe over the summer, something that you would like to tackle, that you would like to work on. Can be related to your art. It can be something else that you'd like to try out. So I'm going to write my 4 goals here, and I'd like you to do the same on your piece of paper. And these don't have to be real specific, but the more specific, I think, the better. All right, so I have finished mine. Hopefully you too have finished yours. So now I have a piece of paper with 4 goals. And I have sew a capsule wardrobe, paint my office, have a garden. And then finally I wrote publish a, which I crossed out, and then wrote my romance novel. Okay, so I've got 4 goals. Now what I'm going to do, and what I want you to do, is to tear that piece of paper into the 4 quadrants. And we all know that we often write things down in no particular order. So now that they are on separate pieces of paper, I'm going to put them in order of the least important to the most important. So I have a garden. That's a goal. Paint my office. I'd like to do that. So a capsule wardrobe, always fun when you're going on vacation. Have a minimum number of outfits that you can put on and still look good. And then publish my romance novel. So things being what they are, I ask you, which one of those things could you do without? And for me, it's going to be have a garden, because even though I know that having a garden would be great, it's not a priority for me. I'm not prepared for it. So that's an easy thing to put aside. So I'm just going to fold that in half and put it aside. Now I'm left with 3 goals. And you too will be left with 3 goals. Okay. So the next one is paint my office. And, you know, truthfully, I haven't worked in my office for a couple of years because I take care of my elderly mother. I just don't have the time. So I'm going to say, okay, I can rip that one in half. I don't have to do that this summer. And now I have 2 goals. Sew a capsule wardrobe and publish my romance novel. I just got back from vacation where it would have been nice to have those garments that I could mix and match. But it's kind of too late now. And I don't know when the next time I'm going on vacation. So I'm going to say, all right, I can deal with that one later. Now, like you, I'm left with one important, major goal. Publish my romance novel. All right. You now are left with one goal. So here's what I want you to do with that goal. Crumple it up and throw it away. How do you feel? How do you feel when you took that one important goal and crumpled it up and threw it away? You feel lousy. You feel rotten. Yes, you do. That's what it's like when you don't take the time to do your art. There is something gnawing at you. There is something you feel unfulfilled. You know what you want to do. You know what you have to do. We are not called, we do not decide to be writers, artists, creatives, makers. We are called to be writers, artists, creatives, makers, gardeners, glass blowers, carpenters, chefs, brewers, makers. We have a calling. You need to answer the call for yourself. But here's the thing. You can pick it up. You can smooth it out. And you can put it someplace where you will see it all the time. That goal, the one you decided was your number one goal. Put that crumpled piece of paper where you can see it as a reminder. You're not dead yet. There is still time. You can still do your art. It's important. So that is one of the most important things. I read that exercise many, many years ago. I have no idea where it was. I wish I did. But it made me realize how important it is and how we can feel when we don't take the time to attend to our own creativity. We need to do that. So doing your art because it makes us happy. That is why we do it. It gives us joy. It also brightens the world. It makes others happy too. No matter what phase you are in your own creativity, you need to find the time to do something, to get something out of it. Okay? So things that you might do, you can continue to reflect on your own creativity. Use that emotion diary as a way to give you some focus in your reflection. Find your own group. I know some people that are here tonight have writers groups that they belong to and share. And that is great, especially if they meet regularly. To find people who share your own same interests. Sometimes it's not productive. I have belonged to many different writers groups that I felt it was a time for people to bitch and moan about why they didn't do something that week. And I think it can be helpful when you find the right group. Absolutely. Find a coach. Find somebody who is qualified and able to help you. This afternoon, I got a text from a woman who I have coached in the past in writing projects, wanting to reconnect with me and wanting a reminder of where to sign up for one of our coaching sessions. So I sent her the link, which is on my website, doyourart.org. And she signed up within a few minutes. So find somebody who can give you support, help you find your own direction, and get you started, keep you going, stay motivated. And stay in touch. I send a weekly email on Fridays with every time it has a try this section. So I usually share some story about my life, about things that I'm experiencing. And then I have some exercises to try. And if you sign up for the newsletter, the weekly newsletter, you will receive a copy of my Do Your Art workbook. I'm revising it. I will be updating it. And if anybody would like a copy, and you have trouble signing up for the newsletter or it doesn't work for whatever reason, just send me an email and I'll send it out to you. My email address is bstockwell@doyourart.org. And I think I pride myself in answering emails in rather a timely manner. And if for some reason I don't, I probably didn't receive it. So check your spelling and stuff and make sure that it actually went through. All right, so that is pretty much what I wanted to accomplish tonight, but I also wanted to ask if you had any questions. You could put that in the Q&A. Also, if you have any books or other tips and strategies that you'd like to share. And before we sign off, because you all stayed to the end, I'm going to offer one lucky person one of my Do Your Art mugs. So I will pick one person at random from the attendees. All right, and I want to make sure that I get the address of that person. Okay, so Stephen Watts, if you want to send me an email with your mailing address, you are the lucky winner of tonight's prize Do Your Art mug. It's a 15-ounce coffee mug. If you don't drink coffee, you can use it as a pencil holder, pen holder, paintbrush holder, whatever. Isn't that a lovely paintbrush? So any other questions? Okay. So before I sign off, I want to once again recognize the cultural councils that supported tonight's session, because without their support, this wouldn't be possible. And that was Acushnet, Buckland, Chicopee, Dennis. I know I'm going to forget something. I know, it's written here. East Bridgewater, Gardner, Harvard, Haverhill, Lawrence, Manchester by the Sea, Norton, and Revere Cultural Councils. These are all local agencies which are supported by the Massachusetts Cultural Council, a state agency. And when I publish my book, Do Your Art, I would love to send you a copy. Other people who have read preview editions of the manuscript, Todd Bryson, who is the author of The Creative's Curse, said, although there have been libraries of books dedicated to the emotional, mental, and sure financial benefits of making art in the modern age, this book is unique in that it shows a clear process for how exactly to do it. So thank you, Todd, for writing that. And then Eric Mizell, who is the author of Coaching the Artist Within and probably over 40 different books on creativity. He read my manuscript and said, this is an excellent guide to the creative process, at once personal, funny, and smart, and well worth your attention. Highly recommend. So get on my email list and you'll know when the book is available, and also my revised workbook too. I put a lot of time and attention, and mostly I wrote a book that I needed to read. So that's how it came to be. Okay. If there aren't any other questions, lots of people are saying they enjoyed participating tonight, and I really appreciate that. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day. But stay in touch, definitely. Sign up for my newsletter, doyourart.org. All right, thanks. Have a great evening.